Hello there, my fellow myth and fantasy nerds. My name is Tanner, and I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. Now, before I move on, a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you all. Now, this week's video will be the epic finale of the Charles Dickens holiday classic, A Christmas Carol. To recap, in last week's video, link up in the cards and in the description down below, Ebenezer Scrooge met the ghost of Christmas yet to come, who showed him just how terribly bleak his most likely future would be. I say most likely because Scrooge came to the conclusion that if he were to change his ways, he could avoid this grim fate. So on that note, as always, please make sure to leave a like on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe down below. Pretty please! It'll help me make more content for you. And without further ado, here is A Christmas Carol Part 5, the finale. Yes, it was in fact his own bedpost. It was his bed, his room, and best of all, it was his own time to fix everything he'd already messed up. It's not too late. From now on, I will remember what past, present, and future taught me, Scrooge said, scrambling clumsily out of bed. All of their lessons shall live in me for the rest of my days. Scrooge was so flustered, and his face was beaming with good intentions, he could barely speak. When he was fighting with the spirit, he cried himself into hysterics, and the tears still streaked his face. My curtains! They haven't been torn down, rings and all, he said, rubbing the curtain against his cheek. They're still here. I'm still here. Those visions of all the things that could have happened haven't yet happened. They won't happen. I'll make sure of that. As this was going on, he was trying and so far failing to get properly dressed. You know, putting his clothes on upside down and inside out and backwards and all other types of troubles clothes get put through. Oh, what to do, Scrooge said to himself, half crying, half laughing, making a complete fool of himself while trying to put on his socks. I feel as light as a feather, as joyous as an angel, as lively as a schoolboy, as gaga as a man who's had a little too much to drink. Merry Christmas to you all, and Happy New Year! He bounced himself over to the living room and sat himself down in the chair, quite out of breath. That's the pot the porridge was in, he said, looking around the room. That's the door Jacob came in. That's the corner where I met Christmas present. That's the window Christmas past led me out of. It all happened. It's all true. His laughter echoed off the walls, and if you had heard it, you probably wouldn't have known it had been a very long time since he laughed. I don't even know what day of the month it is. I don't know how much time I spent with the spirits. I don't know anything anymore. I'm practically a baby. You know, I don't care. I'd very much rather be a baby. He was brought out of his fervor by the sound of church bells ringing vigorously. He ran to the window and opened it with a flourish, sticking his head out, and enjoying a day where there was no fog, as clear, as bright, as sunny as any day could be, and that wonderful, crisp, cold air of winter. What day is it? He asked. Huh? The boy responded. What day is it today, my boy? Today? It's Christmas Day. Oh, Christmas Day, he said happily. I didn't miss it. It's not too late. The spirits all visited me in one night. Oh, of course they did. They're spirits. They can do what they please. He paused for a moment and then asked the boy, Do you know the grocer? The first shop just around that corner? Yes, I do, came the reply. Oh, what a smart lad you are. Tell me, have they sold the prize turkey hanging in the window? Not that small one, mind you, the big one. The one that's practically as big as I am? Yes, yes, that one. Is it still there? It's hanging there right now. Oh, what a delightful lad. I want you to go and buy it for me. Are you serious? Oh, I'm very serious, my young lad. Go and buy it for me and tell them to bring it back here so I can tell them where to deliver it. Come back with the assistant and I'll give you a shilling. Oh, come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown. At this, the young boy took off like a bullet from the barrel of a gun. Scrooge then started pacing and rubbing his hands, saying to himself, I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's house. That's what I'll do. He'll never even know it was me that sent it, he said, laughing gleefully. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. None of the great comedy actors ever cracked a joke that'll compare to this. His hand was shaking as he wrote down the address. And then he went down the stairs and out the door and waited for the young boy and the assistant grocer. Soon enough, they were there with the turkey. And what an enormous turkey it was! Oh, there is no way you can carry that to Camden Town on foot. You simply must have a cab. Scrooge chuckled the entire time, from when he paid for the turkey, to ordering and paying the cab, to when he rewarded the boy, and he continued to chuckle when he sat down in his chair, exhausted, and then chuckled until he cried. He then went to the bathroom and started shaving, which, because his hand was still trembling, was a bit of a challenge. But I have a feeling that on that day, Scrooge could have shaved off the tip of his nose and he'd just stick a bandage on it and be done with it. He then dressed himself in his best clothes and walked into the streets at long last. The other people walking down the street were exactly as they were when Scrooge saw them with Christmas present. Walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge gave everyone a smile so joyous, so charmingly polite, that at least 3 or 4 people wished him a good morning and a Merry Christmas. He returned these greetings, and it was said that of all the cheery sounds Scrooge had ever heard before, those greetings were the most cheerful for him. He didn't walk very far when he stumbled upon one of the men who walked into his counting house and asked for donations to the poor. His heart ached at the thought of how that man would look at him when they met up, but he knew what he had to do. Excuse me, my good man, he said, shaking hands with the gentleman. I'm glad I caught you. A Merry Christmas to you. Did you raise enough funds yesterday? Please tell me you did. Mr. Scrooge? The man asked in disbelief. Yes, that is my name, Scrooge replied, and I know it must not be a very lovely name to you. I do beg your forgiveness, and, if you don't mind, Scrooge whispered into the man's ear. Mr. Scrooge, the man said, flabbergasted, are you quite serious? I am serious, if you please, and not a single penny less. Believe me, there's a lot of unpaid yearly payments included in that. Will you do that for me? I will, the man said, shaking Scrooge's hand wildly. I don't know quite what to say. Please don't say anything, Scrooge said. Will you come back and visit me at some point? Of course. Thank you. Thank you 50 times, Scrooge said. I am in your debt. Bless you. After that interaction, Scrooge went to church and then, after the Christmas service, walked around the town, watching people bustling this way and that way, patting children on the head, talking to and giving money to beggars on the street, looking into people's kitchens as they cooked Christmas dinner, and he found that everything on this walk could give him comfort. Up until that day, he never thought such simple things could comfort him, and yet, on this day, they did. In the afternoon, Scrooge made his way to his nephew Fred's house. He paced in front of the door around a dozen times before he could work up the courage to actually knock. But knock he did. The door was answered by a young servant girl, and he asked her, My dear, is your master at home by any chance? Yes, sir. He and the mistress are in the dining room upstairs. I can take you to them if you like. Thank you so very much, he replied, his hand already on the dining room door. But he knows who I am, and I think I can find the way there. He opened the door gently and inched his face in. There they were, looking at the table, which was immaculately decorated. Fred? As soon as he said the name, his niece-in-law jumped in surprise, nearly falling off her stool. Bless my soul, Fred said, also startled. Now who do we have here? It's, Uncle Scrooge. I've decided to take you up on your invite to Christmas dinner. That is, if you'll have me. Let me tell you, it is a wonder that Fred didn't shake his poor uncle's arm off. Scrooge was practically at home in 5 minutes. Oh, the party was wonderful. All of the guests he saw in his vision with Christmas present were there, and they were just as immaculately decorated as they were in the vision. Scrooge was early at the office the next morning. He had to be early in order to catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. And catch him late he did. 9 o'clock, no Bob. 9:15, still no Bob. In fact, Bob was a full 18.5 minutes late. Scrooge sat with his office door wide open so he could see Bob hurry into his little office. Bob's hat and scarf were off before he even walked in the door, and he was sitting down at his desk with pen in his hand in a hurry as if he was trying to beat the clock. Bob Cratchit, Scrooge said, in as close to his original voice he could get. What are you doing coming here this time of day? I'm sorry, sir, Bob replied, trembling. I know I'm late. Yes, you are. Come here, please. It's only once a year, sir. I was just a little too merry yesterday, sir. I promise it won't happen again, sir. You can be sure of that, my dear sir, Scrooge said. I will not stand this any longer. Because of this, Scrooge said, hurtling over his desk and giving Bob a dig in the ribs, because of this, I am going to raise your salary. Bob stood there confused, and he glanced around to find something that he could use as a potential weapon. He thought for sure that his boss had gone loony and was thinking he'd have to call for someone to bring a straitjacket. A Merry Christmas to you, Bob, Scrooge said, with an unmistakable enthusiasm in his voice. May your Christmas be merrier than any Christmas I've given you for all these years. Not only will I raise your salary, I will also help support your family, and we can talk about your finances over a nice cup of mulled wine. Now, let's stoke the fire and buy another bucket of coal before you dot another I and cross another T. Scrooge was better than his word. He did all of these things and infinitely more for the Cratchits. For Tiny Tim, who in fact did not die, he became almost like a second father. From that day forward, Scrooge was a better friend, a better boss, a better man than the city ever saw, or even all the cities and towns in all the world. Some people saw this change and laughed, but he didn't care. He was thoughtful enough to realize that nothing good on this globe happened where no one laughed in the beginning of it. He figured since they were completely oblivious to anything below the surface, why not let their eyes crinkle in a smile rather than a frown? His heart and soul laughed, and that was quite enough for him, thank you. He had no more dealings with spirits, so I guess you could say he became a teetotaler. From that moment on, people would say he knew how to celebrate Christmas better than anyone. And so, to quote Tiny Tim himself, God bless us, everyone. And there we have it. That was the epic finale of Charles Dickens' timeless holiday classic, A Christmas Carol. If you liked this video and you want more, please consider leaving a like and subscribing down below so you don't miss any new content from me. Also, if you have any other ideas you want to see in any future videos, please leave your suggestions in the comments down below. Who knows? It might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I'll see you all next week with some brand new content for ya. See you guys then.